Hi guys, welcome back to Game Muscle Videos. We are jumping into Pavlov multiplayer to talk a little bit about the differences between VR FPSs and 2D first-person shooters. Now the biggest difference, the most noticeable difference you will find in VR over 2D is you've actually got a 3D gun, a gun in front of you that you aim, a shooty fiery stick that goes where you point it, and you don't have to be looking down the sight. I am trying to shoot these circles on these pillars here. You don't have to look down the sight to be reasonably accurate. Whereas in 2D, you know, you're essentially locked. Your gun cursor's locked in the centre of your screen and you move around like a robot around the environment, which actually would probably be a good tactical way to try and play this game, realistically. But it doesn't feel very natural. And you're, of course, using a mouse cursor to essentially move a 2D pointer around the screen. So in VR, you know, you actually got this object that you can move around objects to fire with and shoot from behind cover, or shoot above your head, or shoot behind your head like a weird gymnast, or shoot from your groin. It's completely up to you. So there's so much more freedom in VR when it actually comes to aiming and shooting, and it is obviously a lot closer to the real activity of shooting. Here we go, someone's going to come around there. Right in the face. Got him with a bit of the spray there, fantastic. And I think one of the things that comes from having the extra depth in the basic aiming mechanics in VR is it is just way more satisfying when you actually shoot people in VR. Over 2D, terrible aim there, just full on spray and he'll walk into the bullets. Okay, so one of the differences obviously with 2D is that you can just rotate super fast, whereas in VR you are sort of limited to a 180 degree, 190 degree arc where you can be really fast. 2D game, you would in a 2D game you would sort of be snapping. So when we were watching these two corridors, you'd be snapping. But I guess in VR you would choose to keep your gun in one location and just keep checking with your head. So you don't actually have to move your gun. You know, you're choosing when you need to move your gun. And then I'm actually lifting it over the wall there. I can put it through this wall. It's not solid. But that was really weird. I just intuitively lifted it over the wall as if my gun was going to bang on it. It shows you how real VR can feel. But yeah, so in VR, you know, that's reasonably fast snap rotation around to actually get different targets if someone's coming from a different angle. It does feel a little bit more comfortable, I have to say, in VR than in 2D. Or it definitely feels more natural. If you're playing Counter-Strike and you're watching 2 bits of corridor, for example, you know, you will find yourself rotating left and right all the time. Whereas in VR, I think you can be a little bit calmer just turning your head. But yeah, it's just different. I mean, that's the thing. 2D shooters are fundamentally abstract and fundamentally arcade. So I'm not sure which is better or worse. I really enjoy 2D shooters, but it's really interesting to just see that difference with a VR shooter.
Yeah, when you're close by, I can hear you if you go with your left hand to the head and press the trigger.
It seems to be a general trend in VR shooters to actually just have the mic always on, and in this game, it really does add to the effect of it being real and you're actually there, in that you can hear the other team's mic, and it's very much if they're talking, you can hear them as you would be able to hear them in real world. Whereas with traditional shooters on, you know, your traditional 90s style FPS, Quake, Doom, Counter-Strike, even the tactical shooters, you normally have a push to talk button, so it's not like you'd accidentally hear people, or people would always have the microphone on by default. So that's quite interesting how that seems to be a bit of a trend that's happening with virtual reality shooters. So to reload in this game, you drop your magazine, stick a new one in, and then I think that's called clearing the breach. I don't know. Cocking the gun, clearing the breach. I'm a British guy. We don't have weapons in this country other than farmers with shotguns and police with MP4s. So the interesting thing with reloading though in VR is that you actually have to use skill to reload. It's a very simple action. It's not hard to do, but if you're under pressure, it might take you longer to reload. If you're someone that manages to stay calm, you will be able to reload more smoothly and you'll be more likely to succeed in a combat situation. And I definitely notice under pressure that, you know, you are slow to reload, or you're panicking, you're running around. Whereas it's just a dynamic that's not found in 2D shooters where you just push R. In 2D shooters, it's more a case of get behind cover and reload, or reload appropriately, or just reload all the time. In VR, there's definitely, or VR games that have a manual reload, there's definitely a skill to reloading and reloading under pressure. And also different weapons tend to have different reload actions. So if the gun loads from the back, for example, you have to reach in, and you've got your magazine here, and you might stick it in the back, you might stick it in the front. If it's a P90, you might stick it in the top. So it's just really interesting how you've got all these different aspects of reloading. Of course, grenades, pull the pin out, toss the grenade, and blow yourself up. Oh, there's my teammate's going to get blown up. Whoops. If you're playing 2D games, pistols don't really make much difference to rifles. Obviously, they're weaker and they tend to fire different. They do different damage. But the actual physicality and the physical aspect of a pistol, and what makes the point of a pistol, why people use pistols in real life, despite them being weaker, is that, you know, you've not got this giant 3D object. You've not got this giant 3D object that you've got to move around an environment. You've got something really small and nimble that you could just hold on to and pop round corners and shoot things with. And again, in 2D, there's no... A pistol is just a secondary weapon that does less damage that you have as a backup. In VR, and I've noticed this especially in Onwards, there'll be times where you actually want to use a pistol because it makes sense over a rifle in a close quarters situation. You can reload it a lot faster than you can a rifle. So again, in a high tension, tense situation in close quarters, you know, it's just a lot easier to work with a pistol than it is a rifle. And though it does less damage, it's incredibly effective. And why I think, you know, in close quarter situations in real life, people probably tend to use pistols or small SMGs. And again, the same thing applies with small SMGs over rifles. Is that they're, you know, because they're physically smaller, they're a lot easier to use in a smaller space than a larger rifle, or even a you know, an actual rifle with a scope on it. So that is another massive difference between VR and 2D shooters. Okay, so with rifles, you actually can choose to look down the scope or not, and it's obviously like the other guns where you can aim from the hip. But also the scope is very much like a real-world scope, even more so than any 2D game, where it's crucial how you position it in front of you and how far away it is from you. Now, it depends on the game and how they've done the scope as to how accurate it is to the real-world thing. And in this case, the scope works at all angles, whereas, you know, with a real-world rifle scope, they can be quite finicky as to where you place it to your eye to how you can actually see through it. But it's a lot harder to aim down the scope in VR than it is down the scope in 2D, so you don't get the same ridiculous sniper rifle advantage that you do in 2D games when you've got a sniper rifle. And it has, but it, you know, you do get the advantage of being able to actually aim into the distance more, and more accurately so. Where you can break sniper rifles down in 2D is that, or all weapons, it's just a case of how fast it fires and how much damage does it do. Whereas in VR, there's a far more emphasis on the three-dimensionality of the gun and how that affects how you use it in 3D space. So it completely changes the dynamics of all the weapons. And again, it's just you just get a degree of depth in VR that you just simply can't find with 2D shooters as he slumps over. So yeah, I think a real big appeal of VR shooters is just the depth that they offer. That's so brutal. Another thing with this is if you're actually looking down the sight with your arms held up, it's actually physically tiring, which of course you'd never get in a 2D shooter. Which is, again, it's a positive and a negative. It makes it super immersive and really enjoyable, but it means you struggle to play VR games for, if you're going to be playing for more than an hour, you're going to either start looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger or just being completely exhausted. And that's the thing, I think you know, 2D shooters and VR shooters, they're complementary to each other. They're different types of games. And it's not a case of VR versus 2D. It's a case of this is just another type of game that you can really enjoy, and it brings its own depth, nuance, and activity to gaming. It's absolutely fantastic. Oh, we're going to have to sneak around this guy. But there you go. That gives you an idea of the differences between VR first-person shooters and 2D first-person shooters. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to click the subscribe button. Don't forget to like us, and check out our next VR video tomorrow. Till then, goodbye, everybody.